A family's dream trip to Disneyland turned into a public humiliation at 30,000 feet. They were labeled a threat, shamed and thrown off the plane because of their 5-year-old son's iPad. The flight attendant who orchestrated their removal smiled as the cabin door closed, confident in her absolute authority. But she made one catastrophic, career-ending mistake. She had no idea that the quiet, unassuming man watching her every move from seat 12B wasn't just another passenger. He was Gerald Finney, the billionaire founder and owner of the entire airline, and he was about to turn the plane around and deliver a lesson in karma that would echo through the entire aviation industry. The air in Terminal 4 of JFK International Airport hummed with the electric chaos of 1,000 different journeys beginning at once. For the Peterson family, it was the start of something magical. David Peterson, a man whose gentle hands and calm voice soothed sick children in his pediatric practice, now held the hands of his own. His daughter, 8-year-old Lily, was practically vibrating with excitement, her hand clutching a worn Minnie Mouse doll. 5-year-old Noah, a whirlwind of energy, was trying to use his small suitcase as a skateboard, his face a mask of intense concentration. Their mother, Sarah Peterson, an architect with an eye for detail and a heart full of patience, corralled Noah with a gentle laugh. "Noah, sweetheart, the floor is for walking, not for rolling." "But Mum, I'm practicing for the Space Mountain ride." He declared, his logic impeccable in the mind of a 5-year-old. This trip was a long-awaited reward. David had spent the last year juggling his practice with grueling on-call shifts at the hospital, while Sarah had successfully landed a major contract to design a new city library. They had promised the kids Disneyland, a promise whispered during bedtime stories and sketched out on breakfast napkins. Now it was finally here. Their flight, Aura Airlines. Flight 715 to Los Angeles was a steel chariot to a kingdom of dreams. They had saved for months, opting for premium economy seats to give the kids a little more room. As they navigated the line at gate B32, David checked their boarding passes for the 10th time. Seats 10D, 10E, 10F, and 10G. A perfect little row for their perfect little family. They were organized, polite, and radiated the quiet joy of people who appreciated the moment. Their bags were correctly sized, their documents were in order, and their smiles were genuine. They were by any measure the ideal passengers. A few dozen people ahead of them in the boarding line, a man in a simple grey polo shirt and worn denim jeans adjusted his baseball cap. He looked like a retired teacher or perhaps a small business owner on his way to a conference. He carried no flashy luggage, just a simple leather messenger bag slung over his shoulder. He boarded with the Zone 2 passengers, found his seat at 12B, and settled in with a paperback novel. No one gave him a second glance. No one knew he was Gerald Finney, the man who had built Aura Airlines from 2 leased planes and a dream into a global competitor. He made a point to fly commercial in various cabin classes on his own airline at least twice a month, unannounced. He believed you couldn't understand the forest by sitting in the tallest tree. You had to walk the ground. Today, he was just another passenger, observing the intricate dance of his company's service. When the Petersons' boarding zone was called, David helped Sarah get the kids settled. Lily immediately pressed her face to the window, her breath fogging the cool acrylic. Noah booster seat clicked into place, was given the family iPad, a sacred artifact loaded with his favorite cartoons and games, complete with a pair of kid-friendly, volume-limited headphones. "Okay, buddy," David said, plugging the bright blue headphones into the jack. "Remember the rules. Headphones on and we use our inside voice." "Okay, Daddy." Noah chirped, already engrossed in a world of animated talking cars. As the last passengers found their seats, the cabin crew began their final preparations. The lead flight attendant, a woman in her late 40s named Brenda Jenkins, moved through the aisle with an air of practiced authority. Brenda was a veteran of the skies with 25 years of service. That service, however, had curdled her disposition. She no longer saw passengers as guests, but as potential problems. Her smile was a thin, brittle thing, a mandatory uniform accessory that didn't quite reach her cold, assessing eyes. From his seat in 12B, Gerald Finney watched her. He knew the type. Efficient, yes, but lacking the warmth that was supposed to be the hallmark of Aura's brand. He made a small mental note. Brenda's eyes swept across the cabin, and her gaze snagged on the Peterson family in row 10. She saw a black family in premium economy. Her mind, a vessel of 1,000 tiny prejudices, made a silent, instantaneous calculation. Her posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. Her thin smile tightened. She continued her walk down the aisle, but the seed of a confrontation had already been planted. The Peterson family, basking in the warm glow of anticipation, had no idea that they had just been singled out, not for anything they had done, but simply for who they were. The promise of a perfect day was about to be broken. The initial ascent was smooth. The plane broke through the grey New York clouds into a realm of impossible blue and brilliant sunshine. Below, the city shrank to a glittering map. For the Petersons, the magic was beginning. Lily was narrating the view to her Minnie Mouse doll, while Noah, headphones on, was giggling at the cartoon on his iPad. The volume through his child-safe headphones was a faint, tinny whisper, barely audible over the powerful hum of the twin jet engines. For about 20 minutes there was peace. David and Sarah spoke in low, happy tones about their plans for the week, which park to visit first, where to have dinner on their anniversary. They were a portrait of familial bliss. Brenda Jenkins, however, was patrolling the aisle with a predator's focus. She had completed her initial service checks and was now looking for infractions. Her eyes scanned for seatbelts, improperly fastened, for bags not fully under the seat, for anything that would allow her to assert her dominance. Her gaze fell once again on row 10. She zeroed in on the faint sound emanating from Noah's headphones. It wasn't loud. In fact, the man in 11C was snoring at a significantly higher decibel level, but the snoring was from a middle-aged white man in a business suit. The cartoon noise was from a small black child. In Brenda's warped view, this was a critical distinction. She strode up to their row, her footsteps unnaturally loud in the calm cabin. She bypassed David, the man on the aisle, and leaned directly over him to address Sarah. It was a calculated power move, a deliberate breach of personal space. "Ma'am," Brenda said, her voice sharp and loud enough for the surrounding rows to hear. "You need to control your child's electronics. Other passengers are trying to rest." Sarah was taken aback. She glanced around. No one seemed disturbed. The snoring man in 11C was still oblivious. "Oh, I'm so sorry," she said politely, her default setting. "Are the headphones too loud? They're volume limited. Federal aviation regulations are very clear about creating a disturbance." Brenda snapped, not answering the question. She pointed a rigid finger at the iPad. "That needs to be turned off. Now!" David leaned forward, his voice the epitome of calm. "Excuse me, miss. I think there's a misunderstanding. The headphones are on, and the volume is very low. We can barely hear it ourselves." Brenda turned her cold gaze to David. "Sir, are you questioning my instructions? I am the lead flight attendant on this aircraft, and my instructions are to be followed without argument. This is a matter of safety and passenger comfort." "I'm not questioning you," David said, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. He was keenly aware of the other passengers now watching them. "I'm just trying to understand the issue. My son is being quiet and watching his show. If someone has complained, we will, of course, turn it off immediately. From seat 12B, Gerald Finney leaned slightly into the aisle. He could hear the entire exchange. He could also see that the premise was absurd. The child wasn't a problem. Brenda was the problem. He watched his face, impassive his mind, recording every detail. This was a critical test of his crew's de-escalation training. So far, they were failing spectacularly. "I don't need another passenger to complain," Brenda said, her voice rising. "I am telling you that the noise is a disturbance. Turn it off." Noah, sensing the tension, took off his headphones. "Mummy, what's wrong?" he asked, his small voice filled with worry. The cartoon's audio, now playing from the iPad's small speakers, was suddenly audible in the immediate vicinity, though still not particularly loud. "Aha!" Brenda exclaimed, a triumphant, ugly look on her face. "Now it's disturbing everyone. I told you to turn it off." "He just took his headphones off because you were yelling," Sarah said, her own voice starting to lose its patient edge. "We are trying to comply. There is no need to be so aggressive." The use of the word aggressive was like a lit match on gasoline. Brenda's face flushed a deep red. She saw this not as a simple disagreement, but as a challenge to her very authority by people she felt were beneath her. "Aggressive, I will show you aggressive!" She hissed, her voice a low, venomous threat. "You are now officially a non-compliant passenger. You have failed to follow the instructions of a flight crew member. I'm going to have to report this to the captain." David was stunned. The situation had spiraled from a barely audible cartoon to a federal offense in less than a minute. "Report us for what?" "For our son watching a cartoon. This is completely unreasonable." "Your opinion of what is reasonable is irrelevant," Brenda spat. "My job is to ensure the safety and security of this flight. Your disruptive behavior is a potential threat." She then did something that sealed her fate. She looked directly at David, then at Sarah, and with her voice dripping with false concern, she said, "People like you are always looking for a problem. It's probably best if you just cooperate." The coded language was unmistakable. "People like you." It hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. David's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek. They had faced microaggressions their entire lives, but this was something else entirely. This was raw, undisguised prejudice at 30,000 feet. 2 rows back, Gerald Finney's hand tightened on the armrest. His expression had changed from observation to cold fury. He had a zero-tolerance policy for this. It wasn't just bad service. It was a cancer to his company's culture. He watched as Brenda turned on her heel and marched purposefully toward the front of the plane, a woman on a mission to ruin a family's life over a manufactured crisis. He remained silent for now. A premature intervention would only deal with the symptom. He needed to see how deep the disease ran. The walk to the cockpit felt to Brenda like a victory lap. Passengers in the forward rows watched her with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. She wore a mask of grave importance, as if she had just thwarted a major security breach. She knocked on the cockpit door with a sharp, specific rap. Inside, Captain Michael Miller and his first officer were running through their cruise checklists. Miller was a pilot's pilot, calm, methodical, and by the book. He trusted his crew implicitly, especially his senior purser. "Come in," his voice crackled through the small speaker. Brenda entered the confined space, pulling the curtain shut behind her. "Captain, we have a situation in the cabin." "What's going on, Brenda?" Miller asked, his eyes still on his instruments. "I have a non-compliant family in row 10. The Petersons. They refused to follow multiple instructions regarding an electronic device. They became aggressive and disruptive when I confronted them. Their behavior is escalating, and I'm concerned they pose a potential security risk to the flight." Every word was a calculated exaggeration, a twisting of the truth into a weapon. The quiet disagreement over an iPad became aggression. The parents' confusion became non-compliance. The family became a potential security risk. These were buzzwords in the aviation industry, words that triggered specific, unyielding protocols. Captain Miller turned to look at her, his brow furrowed. A security risk. Are you sure? What exactly did they do? They were loud, confrontational. They questioned my authority in front of other passengers. The man stood up in a threatening manner. She lied, adding a dramatic flourish. I don't feel the situation is stable, and I can't guarantee the safety of the crew or other passengers if they remain on board. Miller was now in an impossible position. He was flying a multi-million-dollar aircraft with over 200 souls on board. His primary duty was safety. A senior crew member with 25 years of experience had just reported a direct security threat. He couldn't see the situation for himself. He had to rely on her report. To ignore it would be a catastrophic breach of protocol if anything were to happen later. His decision, based entirely on Brenda's poisoned information, was almost instantaneous. "Okay," he said, his voice grim. "We're not even an hour out of JFK. We can't continue a 5-hour flight with an unstable security situation on board. We're turning back. Inform ground control. Tell them we have unruly passengers and will require law enforcement to meet the aircraft." Brenda's heart gave a little leap of dark joy. It was the ultimate validation. The captain, the plane, the entire airline was bending to her will. Back in row 10, the Peterson family sat in a state of stunned silence. The passengers around them were whispering, some shooting them sympathetic looks, others glaring as if they were indeed dangerous criminals. Lily had started to cry quietly, her face buried in her mother's side. Noah just looked confused, his iPad lying dark and forgotten on the seat. "David, what is happening?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know, honey. Just stay calm. This is a misunderstanding. It has to be." David said, trying to project a confidence he didn't feel. His mind was racing. How could this happen? They had done everything right. They were polite, compliant. Yet somehow they had been painted as villains. The captain's voice suddenly filled the cabin, calm and authoritative, but with an undercurrent of tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to an unresolved security issue on board, we are required to return to JFK Airport. We apologize for the inconvenience. The cabin crew will provide further instructions. Please remain in your seats." A collective groan went through the cabin. Vacations were being delayed, and business meetings missed. Eyes darted around, looking for the cause. Inevitably, they settled on the Peterson family. Brenda had successfully made them the focus of everyone's frustration and anger. Brenda returned to their row, her face a stony mask of authority. She was flanked now by another younger flight attendant who looked nervous and unsure. "As per the captain's orders, you will be deplaned upon our arrival," Brenda announced, her voice loud and clear for all to hear. "Please gather your personal belongings. Law enforcement will meet you at the gate." The words "law enforcement" struck the family like a physical blow. "Law enforcement," David exclaimed, his voice rising for the first time. "You're calling the police on us. For what? What crime have we committed? Failure to obey the instructions of a flight crew is a federal offense, sir," Brenda recited, as if reading from a script. "Your behavior has forced the captain to divert this aircraft, costing this airline hundreds of thousands of dollars and inconveniencing over 200 people." She was framing it perfectly, painting them as the sole cause of everyone's misery. A man in the row behind them muttered, "Unbelievable. Some people are so entitled." Sarah began to cry, silent tears streaming down her face as she hugged her children close. The dream of Disneyland had fully unraveled, replaced by a surreal nightmare. They were being publicly shamed, accused of crimes they didn't commit, and their children were terrified. 2 rows back, Gerald Finney watched the entire scene, his face like granite. He did not intervene. Not yet. His plan was solidifying. He knew Brenda Jenkins had just cost his company far more than the fuel to turn a plane around. She had attacked the very core of its values. But the reckoning couldn't happen here, not yet. It needed to be precise, it needed to be public, and it needed to be absolute. He picked up the in-flight magazine and calmly began to read his placid exterior, a perfect camouflage for the storm of fury brewing within. He would let her play out her entire ugly hand before he revealed his own. The flight back to JFK was the longest 45 minutes of the Peterson family's lives. The atmosphere in the cabin was thick with animosity, all of it directed at them. They were prisoners in a metal tube, surrounded by their accusers. David tried to comfort his family, whispering reassurances, but his words felt hollow even to himself. He felt a profound sense of helplessness, a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was a young boy. He was a doctor, a respected member of his community, a man who fixed problems. But here he was, powerless, his character and integrity assassinated by the lies of one woman. Sarah focused on the children, shielding them from the glares. She tried to make it a game. "Isn't this a silly adventure?" she'd say with a forced brightness. "We get 2 takeoffs in one day." But Lily's red-rimmed eyes and Noah's frightened silence told her they weren't buying it. They understood humiliation long before they had a word for it. As the plane began its descent, Brenda made another announcement, her voice crisp and professional. "As a reminder for those deplaning, please have all your personal belongings ready. We will be met by ground staff and security personnel." She avoided looking at row 10, but the message was clearly for them. The moment the plane connected with the jet bridge, a palpable tension filled the air. The fasten seatbelt sign pinged off, but before anyone could stand, Brenda's voice cut through the cabin again. "All passengers please remain seated until the parties involved in the security incident have deplaned. This is for your safety and to cooperate with the authorities." It was one final public twist of the knife. She had effectively put them on display. Every eye was now locked on row 10. David felt his face burn with shame. He slowly stood, gathered their carry-ons from the overhead bin, his movements stiff and deliberate. He helped Sarah with the children who clung to their parents as if they were about to be swept away. As they stepped into the aisle, the whispers were audible. "Can't believe they did that with kids. What did they even do? Ruined my whole day." Brenda stood near the exit. Her arms crossed, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. As David passed, he paused for a fraction of a second. "I hope you're proud of yourself," he said, his voice low and shaking with controlled anger. "Just following procedure, sir," she replied with a dismissive smirk. "Have a nice day." Stepping off the plane was like entering a new circle of hell. Waiting on the jet bridge were not 1, but 2 Port Authority police officers and an Aura Airlines ground supervisor, a man named Robert. The officers looked stern and impassive. Robert, the supervisor, held a clipboard and wore an expression of extreme annoyance. "Dr. and Mrs. Peterson," Robert asked, not waiting for a confirmation. "I'm the duty manager. I've been briefed on the situation. We need you to come with us." They were escorted not back into the bustling terminal, but down a sterile side corridor to a small, windowless office. The room contained a metal table and a few uncomfortable chairs. It felt like an interrogation room. The dream of Disneyland was now a distant, painful memory. Here in this cold beige box, they were suspects. Robert began the debriefing, his tone accusatory from the start. The captain's report, based on information from the senior purser, states that you were non-compliant with crew instructions, became aggressive, and created a security threat that necessitated the diversion of a transcontinental flight. Do you have any idea how serious this is? The report is a complete fabrication, David said, his voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through him. We did nothing wrong. The flight attendant Brenda targeted us from the moment we sat down. She escalated a situation over our son's iPad, which he was watching with headphones. She was hostile, unprofessional, and frankly, I believe her actions were racially motivated. Robert sighed, a theatrical display of weary bureaucracy. So everyone who gets removed from a flight says that. The fact is, a veteran flight attendant and a senior captain made a professional judgment call for the safety of 2 or 12 other passengers. Now, because of your actions, your tickets are void. Aura Airlines will not be rebooking you, and you will not be receiving a refund. Furthermore, we are compiling the costs for the diversion fuel landing fees, crew overtime, and our legal department will be in touch. For now, you are banned from flying Aura Airlines, pending a full investigation. It was a total comprehensive demolition of their rights and their dignity. They were not only being punished, but were also being billed for their own victimization. Sarah, who had been silent, finally spoke, her voice clear and strong. We would like the names of the other passengers in the rows around us. We want to see the security footage from the gate. We want to file a formal complaint against Ms. Jenkins, and we will be contacting our lawyer. You have taken a family on their way to vacation and treated them like terrorists based on the lies of one employee. Robert simply shrugged. You can file whatever complaints you like through the customer service portal. For now, security will escort you out of the terminal. We're done here. As the Peterson family was led through a series of back hallways and unceremoniously deposited onto the curb outside the departures level, the very place they had entered with such hope just hours before Flight 715 was being refueled back at Gate B32. Brenda Jenkins was overseeing the cabin preparations for the second departure, accepting sympathetic words from a few passengers. "You handled that so well," one woman said. "It's awful what you have to put up with." Brenda just smiled. "Safety is our #1 priority." She said, the lie tasting like honey on her tongue. The last of the new passengers boarded. The ground crew was about to close the door. Brenda felt a surge of triumph. She had identified a problem, handled it decisively, and restored order. She had proven once again why she was in charge. Her authority was absolute. The plane was hers. The sky was hers. She had won. As the cabin door was finally sealed for the second time, a sense of relief washed over the remaining passengers. The problem had been removed, and their journeys could resume. Brenda Jenkins began her final pre-flight check with a renewed sense of purpose. She walked the aisle, her eyes scanning for any final infractions, a queen surveying her orderly kingdom. As she passed row 12, a calm, quiet voice spoke from seat 12B. "Excuse me, miss." Brenda paused and turned. She saw the nondescript man in the baseball cap, the one with the paperback novel. "Yes, sir. Can I help you?" she asked, her tone efficient but dismissive. "I wonder if I might have a word with Captain Miller," the man said, his voice perfectly level. Brenda's professional smile tightened. "I'm sorry, sir, but the cockpit is sterile during taxi and takeoff. The captain is a little busy right now, as you can imagine." "I understand that," the man replied, not a hint of agitation in his voice. "But I think he'll want to take my call. Please connect me via the in-flight phone, or better yet, just tell him that Gerald Finney would like to speak with him." The name didn't register with Brenda at first. It was just a name. Sir, as I said, that's not possible right now. I insist to... The man set his eyes, which had seemed placid, before now held a glint of cold, hard steel. He slowly reached into the pocket of his polo shirt and pulled out a simple black business card. It bore no title, just a name and a logo. The Aura Airline's logo. Underneath it read, Gerald T. Finney. Brenda stared at the card. Her brain struggled to connect the dots. Finney. The name was familiar, very familiar. She had seen it on company-wide memos and in the glossy pages of the in-flight magazine's Letter from the Founder. Her eyes darted from the card to the man's face. The face from the magazine was younger, airbrushed and wearing a suit. But the eyes were the same. A wave of cold dread, colder than any high-altitude air, washed over her. It felt as if the floor of the plane had just dropped out from under her. Her mouth went dry. Mr. Finney, she stammered. Yes, he said simply, his voice still quiet, but now carrying the weight of 1,000 jets. Now, please, the captain... Shaking, Brenda scurried to the nearest flight attendant station and picked up the phone. Her hands fumbled with the buttons. Captain Miller, she said, her voice a strained whisper. Go ahead, Brenda. What is it now? Miller's voice was tight with stress. Sir, there's a passenger in 12B. He says his name is Gerald Finney. He has a card. He wants to speak with you. There was a moment of dead silence on the line. Gerald Finney was a legend in the company, a near mythical figure. The idea of him sitting in premium economy was ludicrous. Until it wasn't. Put him on, Miller commanded, his voice suddenly sharp and alert. Brenda, her face pale, walked the phone back to seat 12B as if it were a bomb. She handed it to Mr. Finney, her hand trembling so badly she could barely let go. Finney took the phone. Captain Miller, this is Gerald Finney. How are you today? He asked, his tone disarmingly casual. Mr. Finney, sir, I had no idea you were on board, Miller stammered. That was the idea, Michael. Listen, I have one simple instruction for you. Turn this plane around. We are going back to the gate. Right now. Sir, but we're already on the taxiway. We're third in line for takeoff. We've already been delayed. The report from my purser on the security situation. The report from your purser, Finney interrupted, his voice, losing its casual edge, was a work of fiction. The only security threat on this aircraft tonight was your senior flight attendant, Miss Jenkins, who willfully endangered this flight by filing a false report. The family she had you remove were the victims, not the perpetrators. I witnessed the entire event from 2 rows away. Every word, every action. So, Michael, I'll say it again. Take us back to the gate. That is a direct order. There was no arguing with that tone. It was the voice of absolute ownership. Yes, sir. Right away, sir, Miller said. Finney handed the phone back to a ghostly white Brenda. I believe you heard the captain's new orders, he said. He then turned to the window, his part in this conversation over. A moment later, the engines spooled down, and the plane began a slow, ponderous turn on the taxiway. The captain's voice came over the intercom again, and this time all the previous tension was gone, replaced by a note of sheer bewilderment. Ladies and gentlemen, apologies once again. It appears there has been a significant misunderstanding regarding the earlier incident. We have been instructed to return to the gate immediately. Please remain seated. A wave of confused murmuring rippled through the cabin. Passengers looked at each other, baffled. What could possibly be happening now? Brenda Jenkins stood frozen in the aisle, her blood running cold. The smirk she had worn so proudly was gone, replaced by a mask of pure terror. She looked at the quiet man in 12B, who had now returned to his book as if nothing had happened. She had kicked a family off a plane. She had wielded her power like a weapon. But she had aimed it, by sheer catastrophic chance, directly at the king of the entire kingdom. The humiliation she had inflicted on the Petersons was about to be returned to her 100-fold. The plane was turning around, and this time it was for her. The return to Gate B-32 was surreal. The ground crew who had just dispatched the flight looked on in utter confusion as the massive Airbus A321 wheeled back into position. Inside the cabin, a nervous silence had fallen. Every passenger knew something extraordinary was happening, and Brenda Jenkins was at the epicenter of the impending earthquake. She stood rigidly by her station, her face ashen, avoiding all eye contact. The moment the jet bridge reconnected with a solid thud, Gerald Finney unbuckled his seatbelt. He stood up, folded his baseball cap, and placed it in his messenger bag. Without the hat, and with the determined set of his jaw, his air of anonymity vanished. He now looked every bit the powerful man he was. He didn't look at Brenda. He addressed the younger flight attendant who had been nervously assisting her. Please inform the passengers that there will be another short delay, and that I will ensure everyone is compensated for their time. Then please ask the entire flight crew, including Captain Miller and his first officer, to meet me on the jet bridge, immediately. The young woman nodded, wide-eyed, and hurried to comply. Finney walked to the front of the plane and stepped onto the jet bridge. The air was cool and smelled of jet fuel. He saw the duty manager, Robert, jogging towards the plane, his face a mess of confusion and panic. "What's going on?" Robert demanded, then stopped dead as he saw the man who had deplaned. He didn't recognize him. "You're the duty manager?" Finney asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Yes, Robert Miller. Who are you?" "I'm Gerald Finney. I own this airline," he said flatly. "And you and I are going to have a very long talk about your professional conduct. But first, where is the Peterson family?" Robert's jaw dropped. He paled. The Petersons, we had them escorted out of the terminal, sir, as per procedure for unruly passengers." "There was no procedure for what happened here because this has never happened." Finney countered, his voice like ice. "That family was harassed, humiliated, and illegally removed from my aircraft based on a lie. You didn't investigate. You didn't question. You simply punished the victims. So here is what you are going to do. You are going to get on your radio. You are going to find that family wherever they are, and you are going to bring them back to this gate. If they are in a taxi, find it. If they are at another terminal, find them. If they have already gone home, you will send a car to their house and bring them back. Am I clear?" Yes, sir. Crystal clear, sir," Robert stammered, fumbling for his radio and backing away, his eyes wide with terror. Just then, Captain Miller and his first officer emerged from the cockpit, followed by a trembling Brenda Jenkins and the other 2 flight attendants. They stood before Finney on the jet bridge like pupils before a fearsome headmaster. Finney looked at Captain Miller. His tone was firm but held a note of disappointment rather than pure anger. "Michael, I employ you to be the ultimate authority on this aircraft. That authority requires judgment. You took the word of a single agitated crew member and chose to divert an entire flight without a single attempt at verification. You didn't step out of the cockpit. You didn't ask another crew member. You didn't ask to speak to the passengers involved. You accepted a lie that cost this company a fortune, and more importantly, traumatized a family. Sir Miller began, his face grim. The report was of a security threat. Protocol dictates you use your brain. Captain, Finney snapped, his voice finally rising. Protocol is a baseline, not a substitute for common sense. The protocol for a fire is to use an extinguisher. but you don't douse the whole plane if one passenger lights a cigarette. You assess, you verify, you lead. Miller visibly flinched and nodded, accepting the brutal rebuke. Yes, sir. I understand. Finney's gaze then fell upon Brenda Jenkins. The full force of his quiet fury was now unleashed upon her. Miss Jenkins, he began, his voice dropping back to a low, chilling tone. I have spent 30 years building this airline. I built it on one principle. Above all others, we treat people with respect. It's on our planes. It's in our training manuals. It's the bedrock of our brand. And today, I watched you systematically dismantle that principle with bigotry and a grotesque abuse of power. He took a step closer. You didn't de-escalate. You inflamed. You didn't serve. You intimidated. You didn't see a family on vacation. You saw a target. You manufactured a crisis over a child's cartoon. You lied to your captain, fabricating a security threat, an act, I might add, that could have serious legal consequences for you with the FAA. You forced a plane back to the gate, inconveniencing hundreds of people and costing this company more money than you make in a year. And you did it all, it seems, for the cheap thrill of wielding a little bit of power over a family that did absolutely nothing to you. Brenda began to sob, a pathetic gulping sound. I was just following procedure. I felt threatened. Stop, Finney commanded, his voice cutting through her tears. Do not insult my intelligence by repeating that lie. I was there. I saw it all. You were not threatened. You were the threat. The Peterson family were your passengers, your guests, and you treated them like criminals. You publicly humiliated them. You terrified their children. You had them thrown off this plane and banned from this airline. He paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. Effective immediately, your employment with Aura Airlines is terminated. Your credentials and ID are to be surrendered to the duty manager you just sent on a mission to correct your mess. Security will escort you from the airport. You will never work for this airline or any airline I have influence with ever again. You are a disgrace to the uniform and a liability I will not tolerate for one more second. He turned to the other two flight attendants. For the two of you, consider this a lesson. When you see a colleague acting this way, you have a duty to intervene. Your silence makes you complicit. We will be reviewing your conduct as well. He then looked back at Captain Miller. Michael, find a new senior purser from this crew. Get these people to Los Angeles. I will deal with your performance review personally later. As if on cue, Robert, the duty manager, came rushing back up the jet bridge, breathless. So we found them. They were at the curb trying to get a taxi. They're on their way back now. Good, Finney said. He turned and walked back into the terminal, leaving the shattered remains of Brenda Jenkins's career behind him on the jet bridge. The reckoning was complete. Now it was time for the restoration. The walk back to gate B32 was a disorienting journey through a dreamscape. The Peterson family moved through the sterile airport corridors in a fog of emotional exhaustion and profound confusion. A gate agent, her face a mask of anxious politeness, had found them on the curb, just as the crushing weight of their ruined vacation was truly settling in. She had spoken of a terrible mistake, words that felt too small, too insignificant to contain the magnitude of the humiliation they had just endured. Now, instead of being led to an exit, they were guided through a discreetly marked door into the hushed, refined atmosphere of the Aura Airlines first-class lounge. The contrast was a physical shock. They had just left a cold, windowless room where they were treated like criminals. Here the lighting was warm, the chairs were plush leather, and the air was scented with a faint, calming aroma of white tea and citrus. A staff member offered them bottled water and warm towels with a quiet deference that felt utterly alien. Lily and Noah, drained of tears, clung to their parents, their small bodies rigid with the residual trauma of the last few hours. They looked at the plates of gourmet snacks and the gleaming screens with wide, uncomprehending eyes. David and Sarah stood guard over them, a silent protective unit, still uncertain if this was a prelude to a more elaborate apology or a more insidious kind of trap. A few minutes later, the man from seat 12B walked in. He had shed his anonymous disguise of a polo shirt and baseball cap. Now dressed in a crisp dark blazer he must have retrieved from his bag, he carried himself with an unmistakable air of command. Yet, as he approached them, his expression was anything but intimidating. It was etched with a deep personal shame. "Dr. and Mrs. Peterson," he began, his voice calm and resonant. He didn't stand over them. Instead, he pulled a leather ottoman closer and sat down, bringing himself to their level. "My name is Gerald Finney. I am the founder and owner of Aura Airlines." David's back stiffened. Sarah's hand tightened on Noah's shoulder. The bizarre events of the day suddenly snapped into a single, coherent, unbelievable picture. "I was a passenger on your flight today, seated in 12B. Finney continued, his gaze unwavering as he met theirs. "I saw everything that happened, every word, every gesture, and on behalf of my entire company, and from me personally, I am here to offer you my deepest, most profound apology." He let the words settle in the quiet room. There was no corporate jargon, no evasive language, just a raw, direct admission of failure. "There are no excuses for what you and your children endured today," he said, his voice thick with sincerity. "You were targeted, harassed, and publicly humiliated by an employee who betrayed every value we stand for. Her behavior wasn't just unprofessional, it was inhumane. I can only imagine the pain, the anger, and the sense of helplessness you must be feeling." Finney's directness was disarming. David, who had been preparing for another fight, another defense of his family's dignity, found his own anger beginning to recede, replaced by a weary curiosity. "I want you to know," Finney went on, "that the consequences for this failure have been swift and absolute. Ms. Jenkins has been terminated effective immediately. Her report against you has been expunged, and I have personally opened a formal investigation with my legal team and the FAA into her filing of a false security claim. She weaponized our safety protocols against your family, and that is an unforgivable breach. The duty manager who processed you at the gate has been suspended without pay, pending a full performance review. The lifetime ban placed on your family has of course been erased from our system as if it never existed. With each sentence, a layer of the nightmare was peeled back. Sarah felt a profound wave of relief wash over her, so potent it almost made her dizzy. The institutional weight that had been crushing them was being lifted piece by piece by the one man who had the power to do it. "But undoing the damage isn't enough," Finney said, leaning forward slightly. "I can't give you back the hours of terror you went through. I can't erase the memory of this from your children's minds, or the sting of being judged and condemned in front of a plane full of strangers. The only thing I can do is try to replace that stolen time with something better, and ensure you have the resources to heal from this." He paused, and his gaze softened as he looked at the children. He noticed the worn Minnie Mouse doll still clutched in Lily's hand. "I see you have a friend there who was hoping to meet the boss," he said gently. "It wouldn't be right to disappoint her." He then looked at Noah. "And you, young man, I think you were watching Blaze and the Monster Machines. Am I right? It's a good show. My grandson loves it." For the first time in hours, a flicker of childhood innocence returned to the children's faces. Noah gave a tiny, hesitant nod. It was this moment of simple human connection that finally broke through David and Sarah's defenses. This man wasn't just doing damage control, he was trying to mend their children's stolen joy. "Your vacation was ruined before it began," Finney stated, returning his attention to the parents. "So we are going to start it over, the right way. The next flight to Los Angeles departs in 2 hours. You and your family will be flying in our first-class lie-flat suites as my personal guests. A private car will meet you at LAX. I've taken the liberty of booking you a suite for the next 7 nights at the Grand Californian Hotel with park hopper passes for your entire stay. All meals, all expenses. Everything is on us. I have also credited 1 million frequent flyer miles to each of your accounts, and this is separate from the formal process. Our general counsel will be in touch with a representative of your choosing tomorrow to discuss a significant financial compensation package for the distress, defamation, and trauma you suffered today. This is not a gift. It is a restitution." The Petersons were speechless, overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the apology. David finally found his voice, a thick knot of emotion in his throat. "Mr. Finney, why are you doing all this?" Finney looked at him, his expression serious. "Because my name is on the side of that plane, Dr. Peterson. And today your family was hurt under my name. That's not something I can live with. Now, if you'll accept, I would be honored to personally escort you to your new flight." The story of Flight 715 didn't end in the first-class lounge. It exploded into the public consciousness. A business traveler in row 11, appalled by Brenda's behavior, had discreetly filmed the initial confrontation and the stunning climax on the jet bridge. The video uploaded to social media went supernova. For Brenda Jenkins, the public firing was only the opening salvo of her karmic reckoning. She watched horrified as her face became a symbol of corporate bigotry. News outlets dissected the footage and commentators condemned her actions. Convinced she was a victim, she hired a lawyer and filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit for wrongful termination and defamation. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. Aura's legal team, with an unlimited budget and Finney's icy resolve behind them, countersued. The discovery process was a public vivisection of her career and character. Passenger testimonies painted a unanimous picture of a hostile and prejudiced employee. The judge dismissed her case with prejudice, calling her claims frivolous and without merit, and her on-board conduct a malicious abuse of authority that endangered public trust in air travel. She was ordered to pay Aura's staggering legal fees, leaving her financially ruined. The FAA, completing its own investigation, permanently revoked her flight attendant license. The career she had lauded over others was annihilated. Unemployable in the sky, she eventually found work stocking shelves at a big-box retail store, a ghost of the authority she once so cruelly wielded. For Gerald Finney, the incident was a terrifying glimpse into the dark corners of his own empire. In an emergency board meeting, his voice thundered with cold fury. "This isn't a training issue. It's a culture issue. We hired her. We promoted her. We created an environment where a 25-year veteran felt empowered to do this. The rot stops now." He spearheaded a radical overhaul of company policy. He brought in leading sociologists and de-escalation experts to rebuild their training from the ground up. And in a widely publicized move, he invited David and Sarah Peterson to consult on the new program. They helped shape a curriculum focused on empathy, implicit bias, recognition, and crew intervention. The airline officially named the new mandatory certification module the Peterson Protocol. It was a permanent institutional monument to the family that had been wronged ensuring their experience would serve as a lesson for generations of employees to come. On their flight to Los Angeles, nestled in the comfort of their private suites, David and Sarah watched their children finally fall asleep, their faces peaceful for the first time in what felt like an eternity. "We were lucky, Sarah," David whispered, his voice heavy. "He just happened to be on our flight." How many people, how many families aren't that lucky? That question became the seed of a new purpose. They accepted the generous compensation from the airline, but they didn't use it for themselves. They established the Wings of Grace Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to advocating for passenger rights and providing legal and financial assistance to those who face discrimination in travel. Their nightmare had forged them into advocates. Their pain was transmuted into a powerful force for change, a quiet but unwavering voice ensuring that what happened to them in the skies above New York would happen to no one else ever again. The story of the Peterson family and Gerald Finney is a stark reminder that our true character is revealed in how we treat others, especially when we are in a position of power. Brenda Jenkins believed her uniform gave her absolute authority, but she forgot the most important rule: accountability. In contrast, Gerald Finney, a man who owned the entire plane, showed that true power lies in humility, justice, and the courage to do what is right, no matter the cost. This story serves as a powerful testament to the idea that prejudice and arrogance will eventually be met with a reckoning, sometimes in the most dramatic and unexpected ways. If you believe in justice, and that karma always finds its way, show your support. Hit that like button so this powerful story can reach more people. Share this video with your friends and family, because these are the lessons in humanity we all need to remember. Most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more true stories of justice being served. And we want to hear from you. What would you have done if you were a passenger on that flight? Let us know in the comments below. Your voice matters. Thank you for watching.